Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon and you're very welcome to this. It's a podcast and it's all about the Irish League, which triumphantly returned this weekend for game week 1. 6 games went down, 6 teams emerged victorious, with New Boys Bangor being just one of them, catching Cliftonville off guard to claim all 3 points on Sunday afternoon. Already, there's been some significant results up and down this league, and we're going to talk about them all on this, your latest weekly edition of Kick and Match. After dusting off the microphone last week, let's see if we remember how to review games in the first weekend wrap-up podcast. Now I'm joined by a familiar face and voice, especially if you're at the live show in Puggleglies, whatever it was, a week and a bit ago. From Shout at the Oval, Glentoran podcast, hello Matthew Brown.
Hello Peter, great to be back on talking about actual football, actual games.
Yes, it was all season preview podcast that went out last week. You can of course listen to that after this one. It has all the big predictions. Matthew Brown isn't in it, but Joe and Ross from Around the Grounds are in it, and it's fair to say a couple of their opinions got people stirring over the few days before the season kicked off on Saturday. Mainly Portadown fans.
Well, it's not really surprising. I suppose they wouldn't have been too happy with Ross's prediction in particular. Pretty sure I had Portadown though 10th, so maybe not the best.
You and I were quite similar because of the live show when you were there. You helped predict the season and gave your own table that was there. But unless you were there, you don't know what it is. Could be similar to mine, could be all over the place. You just don't know. But thank you to everybody who checked out last week's podcast. It's the most listened to I've ever done. It hit there like before Saturday's game. So if you're new here or you've been around since episode 1, how you doing? The way this works is that myself and my friend Matthew, we're going to go through the games. And going into Sunday's fixtures, because it was split right down the middle, 3-3, I wasn't quite sure what was going to lead this podcast, but by the end of Sunday, I felt as though there's only one. Bangor are back in the big time, and they came back with a bang. Cliftonville are probably licking their wounds and feeling as bad as how Bangor is feeling good. But they did the business at home in a big game, big crowd, and I'm sure other teams that will feel as though Bangor will be their competition near the bottom of the league aren't feeling as hot. But it's what you want from an outsider's point of view at the start of the season. You want the team to come up, get a big scalp like that, and just see the home crowd go wild. And I feel as though Bangor played exactly the way we expect them to, and they put Cliftonville to the sword. Big Arthur's leading the charge.
They literally they sat deep, and I think that they were receiving a lot of criticism from, if you had a look on social media, people were saying, oh, this Bangor team's going straight back down, they can't keep playing like this. Cliftonville were obviously hitting the bar and getting so close, and then all of a sudden it's the big scalp from Bangor. And it's just funny how opinions change by the end of the 90th minute. But as a neutral, that's what you want. You want that game to be fiery. You want the game to have a bit of an upset. You want it to say, where the Irish League is back, because it was a game that had perfect way to kick it off on TV as well. It was ideal. And I mean, I said at the live pod, and I think it's true that Bangor are going to find the likes of that pitch a leveler, but people are not even just a pitch. It's a sort of mental thing, a mental block. You're going there. People are going to have seen what they've done to Glentoran last season, and they're not going to just roll over and have their bellies tickled as they showed yesterday. They were under the cosh for large periods of that game, and they came away 3-1 winners. Like that is some result.
We've already established one of the new cliches for the season 25-26, and that is Clannyboy Park. That's a difficult place to go to. We knew that was going to be the case, but this is one of these games that I think will be referred to all year, and it's exactly what Bangor wanted in their opening day. They wanted a game that was pretty much a free hit, get the crowd in, and go against a team who was pretty much out of sorts, and that was Cliftonville in a complete nutshell. Fans of the Reds will be hoping that this is not the side that is going to continue on to the rest of the campaign. They started brightly enough, tried to get through the gears, tried to control the tempo of play. Bangor was just pressing with such intensity that it made that backline look very shaky. A few moments where Cliftonville would want to forget, and then eventually the pressure kind of came true, and then bit of poor positioning, maybe just not dealing with at the back. Bangor take this lead before the half, and you think, maybe Bangor could do bits here, but I thought Cliftonville changed their shape in the second half, and they got that goal early thanks to Ryan Kerr. And of course, as you mentioned there, they hit the crossbar. Was it twice in that first half? Without
Twice the first and then once in the second.
They never really controlled much of the play in Bangor's half. Usually that's something you would think about with Cliftonville, is that they're playing ticky-tack around the box and just making that back line sweat. But it all felt like it came from deep. And it was Curran and it was Reece Campbell trying to grab these balls out of the air. And if there's one thing if Bangor's going to do, if they are going to do well, it's going to be using their physicality to their advantage. And they did that all over the pitch.
Yeah, they certainly did. And the other thing is their finishing was clinical. Now, of Kyle Owen's goal was maybe a bit fortunate, but he found himself in a position that you'd expect his brother to be in. But the other two finishes were absolutely, they were super headers. They were really, really good, I thought. And they benefited from that, because when you're maybe going into these games not expecting to have a lot of chances, you have to take the ones that you do get. And they did that yesterday, and they'll need to do that for the season. An absolutely fantastic crowd as well at Clanley Park. Like they did get good crowds in the championship, so I did think they would get a good crowd yesterday. But it was absolutely brilliant to see, and just it being a wee tight ground and the fans on top of you. When Bangor do get those leads, like I know from last year, the crowd can spur them on. And on top of that, your fans can really get on your back. And I did think that once Cliftonville got that equaliser, that Bangor would crumble and Cliftonville would probably go on to win easy.
I agree.
But that didn't happen. They just kept going. And it was brilliant to see. It was a great way to start the season.
I think the one stat which I really enjoyed from the broadcast was them reminding us all that Ben Arthurs has been as a part of this Bangor project from pretty much the beginning. And for him to take this step up, there was going to be questions of, well, is he a top flight striker, and is he someone that's going to get the goals even close to what he had done in previous seasons? He is a handful. He looks like he's got the eye in, and what a header that was. Great ball in from O'Mahony, but I mean, he found himself in the box, he beat the defender, and he just glided that exactly where it needed to be.
Had some power on it, and he is a player who I'm really interested to see. The Irish League Jimmy Vardy, you might say, because he has came through the levels with Bangor, and now he's in the top flight. And I know there has been interest from top flight clubs in him, and he was quite happy to remain at Bangor and trust in the project that's happening there. And I'm just really interested to see, is he going to be like a sort of John McGovern type player? You know, obviously John got injured, but he came up and did really well, and ended up getting his move. Or I was thinking, is he going to be more of one of those players? There's been players through the years who have yo-yoed up and down, and they've been a top player in the championship, but they've never really quite cut it in the top division. Michael McLellan's a fine example of that. But he got off to a brilliant start, and in the first half, I was sort of thinking, is his game, because I hadn't seen an awful lot of Ben Arthurs, and I was like, is he going to be more of this sort of hold up player? Or we're not really going to see him playing on the cusp. But I mean, that header, if you put balls into the box, people are going to be very wary of that. Be interested to see how they pick him up at corners.
And that's exactly what Bangor are going to need, aren't they? They're going to need just that little pressure reliever. If they can just get a goal out of nothing, that's going to help them a lot. I said last week that if there was any hope of them staying up this year, they needed to start off brightly, get a few wins out of these first 5, 7, 10 games. One for one's pretty good. I do think that Arthurs is going to get a lot of the praise. I do think that Reece Neal also should get a bit of credit. That's exactly the type of player a team in that position needs. Just fighting to win every ball, physical, energetic, and he was obviously at the back line for Bangor, but he felt he was everywhere on that pitch.
Yeah, and I thought he did have a very good game, and I just thought in general Bangor played well as a unit. Just very well organised. I did, like I said, I'm not going to sit here and think and say that, you know, for the full 90 minutes, I thought the Bangor were absolutely superb and would go on and win the game 3-1. I didn't. Cliftonville will be kicking themselves. They had so many opportunities. There was, like I say, hit the bar 3 times. And I did fear for Bangor in those early opening exchanges. It was 0-0 for such a long time, and I was like, this if Cliftonville get one here, the floodgates could open. So it wasn't a case of Bangor went out there and blew them away on the pitch. It wasn't a game like that. But they hung in there, and I think that's what they're going to have to do in certain games. These games against Cliftonville, even though Cliftonville aren't necessarily, can I consider them a top six side because they didn't finish there last year, but traditionally they are. And Bangor probably will look at these games at Clandy Park and even away from home as a bit of a free hit because they'll be looking to pick up the points against the teams around them. So now that the best start that they could possibly have was getting that win yesterday and putting the fear of God into any team who's going to Bangor. They're putting a statement out there that they will not be toyed with. You know, they're there to play with the big boys and they don't plan on going anywhere.
Cliftonville did look like the better side on the ball, but they simply didn't punish Bangor. Like, for all the skill and ability they have in that team, that looked like 11 players of individual players rather than a team. And I know there's been a lot of turnover and they hope there's still players to come in here. But you know it's not a good day for Cliftonville when Roy Hale's picking up the ball on the wing deep and trying to pump it up high. And, you know, Reece Campbell wasn't getting enough time on the ball, trying to dictate play. And yet you talk about those balls that ricochet off the post, but it's not like it came from intense periods of pressure. And I thought they fixed that ever so slightly going in to the second half. They play with a bit more intensity, but they just got caught out with that Arthur's goal, and then they got caught chasing. And I wonder, with all three of those goals, do you question maybe how stout this Cliftonville backline is? Because names-wise, it looks like it can be strong, but they really shouldn't have got caught out in the way that they did, I feel.
Yeah, see, it's a strange one with Cliftonville because before a ball has even been kicked, you feel like they're a bit of a wounded animal. You feel like they're going into the season with their tails between their legs, you know, their heads are down, and you're just a bit concerned for them because there's been a lot of talk from their fans about how their squad isn't strong enough, and they've been getting a lot of bad press for you know how they exited Europe and the way things are going there because obviously they're waiting on this takeover. And it seems like every time you open up a newspaper, one of their players been linked with a move away. So they were under pressure going into this game, and it is strange because we said last at the live podcast that Cliftonville, when they have their best players on the pitch, are an absolute match for anyone, and Hale is going to be absolutely massive for them this season, keeping them fit. But you know that team on Sunday were just, I wouldn't say they looked miles off it because that's maybe being a bit harsh, but they just didn't have that cutting edge, and you have to worry for them, especially if Joe Gormley isn't going to produce that form of last year, especially then where, and you could say this honestly, you could say this for so many teams in the league, like where are their goals going to come from?
It's when a goal does come out of nowhere, how do they react? They're not a team that's ready for a shootout, are they? And you know, if we're being real, that first goal and the third goal in particular, if they aren't going to deal with those balls in, those set pieces, those crosses, then they're going to be up against it because other teams are going to be defending a lot deeper. And I don't really see Cliftonville having the players to try and break that down. He came on late. I like the stature of Falls, but I didn't see too much from him. And outside of that, there's nothing really to say about Reece Campbell and everybody else. They need bodies. They need that bit of confidence as well, I would argue. But they got caught out, and going into the next few weeks, it's not like it's an easy road over the next few whiles to kind of get your confidence back. But that's their first real bruise of the season. And as much as expectations are slightly lower, they can't let that continue. We can't be sitting here talking 3-4 weeks from now that this keeps on happening.
No,
The big game on... Go ahead.
no, it's one of those with the Cliftonville that you look at their opening three fixtures and you were going, well, they would love 4 points, but they definitely need the three because Bangor, you would have thought was maybe a bit of an easy start for them. But now they're going into their next two, Coleraine, Larne and Linfield. So you're going, you know, where's their next 3 points going to come from if they're going to go up against those boys? You know, you're looking sort of at going into the early weeks of September with no points on the board, which is unthinkable because then you've got a hill decline.
Just thinking about on Sunday, I really felt going into that weekend that Korean Lauren was being slightly slept on as a really early season tone setter. Were Korean going to take care of Lauren, the team that they very much want to replace in the title race, and can they do it at home? Or is Lauren, who have looked fairly tight at the back outside of the game against Portuguese opposition last week in Europe, would that experience kind of show that maybe Korean have got a lot more to do? Korean went out. It's Joel Cooper who gets the goal. That's why they spent the money. He's done there exactly what he used to do over the past few seasons for Linfield and just squeak out that goal exactly when they needed it. It felt like there was a massive sense of relief up the showgrounds when he got it late on. There wasn't really much for Lauren to kind of turn around with all the players that they have missing through suspension. I think that's a big, big result for Coleraine, and it gets them up and running early.
It's an absolutely massive result for Korean, and the reason that I think the Korean are going to win the league is because of that man, Joel Cooper. He is going to do that so often. He's going to dig them out so often. And I mean, when I say dig them out, it sounds like they were maybe getting battered, or I only seen highlights of the game, but I did read back and I heard that the first half was sort of like a scrappy, tight affair, and then second half Korean maybe took it up a notch, and deserved the 3 points. Now I know Lauren had a good few players missing, but I think that that Joel Cooper's experience and history would say that he is going to do that more often than not. It's not always going to be a smash and goal. It's going to be more of a smash and grab sometimes. But he is a player who can take a game by a scruff of the neck. But he's also a player who will just keep going until the end and will just nick you one. And that's exactly what he did against Lauren.
Every top team are going to have those games where they're going to just squeeze through it. It's about churning those points through. But you're right, looking back at the highlights, there's so many chances there for Coleraine, and I'm sure their fans thought, this could be a place where 2 points just fade us. We don't really know what Larne are going to be like as a force this year. A lot of their fans are saying, you know what, you're all discounting us, and maybe it's a good thing that we're going to be the dark horses. And I was actually starting to believe that after maybe downplaying what they were able to achieve this season. And they are likely to get more wins than they do have losses. But the reason why I agree with you, and I think that Korean are going to be the team that are going to win the Gibson Cup this year, is I just think what they've added to this team is firepower. And they're able to just perhaps do something that other teams don't, and that is just go through the gears and get the goals. Yes, they might concede a couple along the way, even though I think this back line is maybe a wee bit slept on as well, but they're going to break down teams. And in fact, even if teams are going to sit back and deep and play these five-man back lines, I think there's enough players and enough on the bench to mix it up that they're going to get through these games. And the hope, if you were maybe a Larne or a Glentoran or a Linfield fan, is that this team is going to take a while. And it may be proven right, that still may happen over the next few weeks, but this team takes a while to get going. There's a bit of frustration. There's the odd, game that slips through the net. And particularly if you're Linfield, you'd think, well, maybe Larne at home, that's a typical game you want. Maybe, you haven't got ready. Larne have had that European experience. But Coleraine look like they're going through the burners already, and it is only one game. But when you look at the friendlies, sometimes you can see the team and thinking, well, how's this team going to set out? Who's going to all start? We now know what a big game as it was, what Coleraine are going to put themselves out there for this big game. They've got Harris now as their goalkeeper due to injuries elsewhere. But, oh my goodness, Patching, Shelvin, McGregor, Glacken, Cooper. And that's not including the players who are going to keep you out with the likes of Cody Lance Foster and Don and Ives and Kane. This is a solid squad.
It's a really, really good squad. And we had a very similar outlook on Korean this season, and I just think that when you look at the quality they have in that team, that I just think that people are maybe looking at the name. I think if you put that, if those players all played for Glentoran or Linfield, people will be putting them down 100% as favourites to win the league. There's no doubt about it. But because it's Korean and they haven't done it in such a long time, and despite the fact, obviously, the Glens haven't done it in such a long time, but people are just going to associate the name of Korean with, well, it might take a while. But I just don't see it. I just can't see them, they've got so much quality that even when players tire, they can maybe bring on another player. I think that Will Patchin's going to be absolutely fantastic player in this league, where you just get that wee bit more time. Listening to their fans yesterday, it seems like the two centre halves, Cody Lance Foster and Charles Dunn, were super, but Lyndon Kane. So they've got all these here
He
shiny new
did look
things,
sharp.
and he had a really good game, and I think that he obviously is looking at what's happening, because Reece Campbell was a good player for Korean, and they went, thank you, but no thank you. You can go off the Cliftonville, and Lyndon Kane will be watching over his shoulder, so he can maybe take his game up a level, and rediscover, because I think he lost maybe a wee bit of form over the last couple of seasons, and I think that he might rediscover his best form in this setup. And what an exciting time to be a Korean fan. Huge crowd down there. Really good opening game for them, and they'll be delighted to be taking the 3 points.
I was trying to look back and think about what were the signs for Larne to go on the big 2-year run that they did. And I don't think many believed that they were going to do it until they eventually did. That's not trying to use that as an example to back up the Korean thing, but sometimes you have to realise you're not going to see it until you do. And you just have to kind of look at it and go, this is all the elements that we've seen succeed before, and we've seen a bit of that with Larne, and I think a lot of that is there with Korean. It's a faster turnaround than we would expect, but we all have to remember this has been, bits and pieces of this have been put together since January, really. They're set up for a loss next game, aren't they, now, Matthew? But look, let's talk a bit about Larne and that sentiment that I'm feeling, that perhaps they are being slept on a tiny bit. They still have all this, pretty good squad when it comes to the league. And one of the areas which I think maybe people would look at other teams being a weakness, it doesn't look to be the weakness when it comes to bodies. They've got plenty of attacking talent, but they just haven't shown it yet this season. And I'm including those European games. Like, they have scraped by, and they've been impressive performances without scoring. And on Sunday, it suggests that they're still slightly lacking when it comes to knitting that all together.
Yeah, this is the thing. So I obviously, me and you have a similar outlook again on Larne and what we expect from them this season. But I was seeing the reading what other pundits and things were saying, like reading papers or listening to podcasts, and everyone seemed to be quite big on Larne. In fact, some expected them to maybe win the league, challenge for the league, finish second, that sort of thing. And I thought, well, maybe I'm being harsh on them, and looking at that far. And I always thought that maybe it was the lack of firepower, and that was losing Andy Ryan. They didn't score a lot of goals last season, but then, you rightly highlighted that they have a lot of firepower. When you look at it, you've got strikers there that most teams in this league would take. So if they can get one of them firing or two of them firing, then certainly they'll be a threat to anyone, because everywhere else in the pitch they look pretty decent. And then the other thing for me was their defence, because they've lost two colossal players in Bolger and Want. They're two fantastic players who will be a loss to anyone. Now they've still got the likes of Aaron Donnelly, and and they've got consistency in goals with Rowan Ferguson, who they obviously trust highly. But I just
Good summer for him as well when it comes to the penalty shootouts. So
yeah, certainly, and he's been there for them in some big games, and made some big saves. Now he's made a couple of errors as well, but overall, you don't play in a successful Larne team for this length of time if you're a poor player, if you're not rated, and they obviously really like him and really trust him. I think Larne is going to be one of the more interesting ones, because the signings that they've brought in, we don't really know an awful lot about them. But then there they went on Sunday with, I think I read 7 players missing, and that's a lot. And they nearly got a point away to Korean, which there won't be many teams do this season. Not many teams will go away to Korean and get a point. So they won't be massively disappointed losing 1-0 to Korean, and I don't think we should be too harsh on them either. Whilst I do have question marks over them, I think that that performance is probably pretty decent. And you just got sucker punched at the end by a bit of Cooper magic.
I have to agree there. But it's tight margins in this league, and if we are to wrap up our game on Sunday, I think a slightly surprising result, just based on how particularly Dungannon had been going into this game this summer. It felt as though they were pretty much using all that momentum in all those games the way they ended last season. But Linfield turned the screw, and it's that man Offord leading the charge. Hat-trick hero for him, and as much as, by all accounts, if you talk to Linfield fans, it wasn't a particularly great first half for them. They love the second, and there is potentially your new man, your new hero. Offord hasn't particularly set things alight in a blue shirt yet, but that feels like his coming out party for them.
Yeah, well, I mean, you say you're surprised. I'm not, because Linfield at home are just a bit of a different animal, to be honest with you. They just seem to not just get it done, but they usually get it done quite comfortably. And I just thought that that would be much more the same against Dungannon. Kieran Offord, I've been really surprised at how seldom he's been used against or for Linfield. If you watch the European game against Shelbourne, the commentators were basically talking about him for the entire 90 minutes, and he wasn't even on the pitch. And I think that I expected to see a lot more of him, and I think that Linfield fans felt the same way. And that there he was there yesterday, doing exactly what a striker should do. Interesting to see he took the penalty. Despite the shouts that Chris Shields wouldn't be taken off penalties.
Yeah, that's a kind of a big deal for my fantasy team. So I think that was the first thing I noted.
Yeah, because it was after Chris Shields missed his penalty. It was said that no, he'll not be taking off penalties because he's class at them. The first penalty they get off it. But Kieran Offord, then it's just that striker's instinct. Like for the third goal, the save is made, and then he just follows it up. He doesn't give up. He looks for the ball and follows it up, and that is what he was doing for Crusaders. He was like this sort of fox in the box at times. He was following everything through. If you ever listen to Chris Morgan talks about how he used to get himself another 10 goals a season just by following everything through, just never stopping, just always following through, and that's sort of what he does. The one thing I will say, that's an absolutely wick celebration.
Yeah, but there's, in a world of not as great celebrations and players mimicking players doing their celebration who happen to be like maybe 3-4 years older than them, I will forgive it.
Yeah, well, I think not too many people will be picking up on that anyway, but I think you're right in that is him sort of announcing himself on the stage. And Linfield fans will be, they'll be very excited about the idea of having those two playing in it, like Fitzpatrick and Offord playing in a front two together. And I think that you didn't hear too many cries about formations and Kirk Miller playing left wing back and things like that from Linfield yesterday.
When I think of Offord, and I know I've been like captain of the fan club from like the minute he joined the league, but players like that always do well in the Irish League. Very little has changed. You mentioned Chris Morgan there. Like I know I compare Offord most to Lee Bonus, but players who are happy to run the channels, bustle, has a decent shot on them, just constantly hassling defenders, they often get a queer amount of goals. It's like players like that, and as well as often big men who are very good with their head, they're oftentimes the goal getters. And it's strange because we saw a little tiny preview of what Offord could do in the Irish League in the first couple of 3-4 months when he was in that, let's say, relatively poor Crusaders team, trying to drag them out from mediocrity. And what I felt he benefited from was being the main man, the main striker. And when he went to Linfield, there was a case of, whoa, hold on your horses. You're not just getting in our team just yet. We're going to have to blood you. We're going to have to, find your rhythm. And almost like they were waiting for a game like this to arrive. They've somewhat, maybe being forced is over the top, but they have been ushered into this situation where they're like, well, we probably need to start Offord and Fitzpatrick. It feels like that is now the default position now for that team. They should work well together and maybe bring a bit of joy to those Linfield fans, because in a team that's very much muesli and doing the right thing, Offord is this bit of magic and colour.
Well, I think it was last week one of the guys in the podcast said that if Offord wins the Player of the Year, then Linfield have won the league. And, that was just the absolute perfect example of that at the weekend. If he wins Player of the Year, he's scored a serious amount of goals, and Linfield will be champions, because there's just no doubt about that. I think goals are at a premium in this league at the minute. I think last year there was hundreds of fewer goals scored than the previous year. And if Linfield have got themselves a goal to score who is going to score, say, 20 to 30 goals, then that's absolutely massive for them because they don't lack goals elsewhere. Let's be honest. They're not a team who lacks goals. The players chip in from all over the pitch for them. He, as maybe we're getting a bit carried away. Maybe, who knows, in the next few weeks he might put in a few stinkers. But I was just very curious about the whole case of Offord and why wasn't he starting games last season?
Like, they spent
Over 100K on him. Like,
it's been reported,
yeah.
or it's suggested that it's that much. So, yeah. But hey, he's in now, and Linfield fans are glad to have a player of that quality. Looking at the Swifts, it's hard to really take too much from this. It's their hardest game, or one of their hardest games of the year. Yeah, there's a few, I would say, dodgy one-on-one individual mistakes along the way, but this is not a team that's expecting or has the budget to go fight at the top of the table. A few of those mistakes cost them 3-0, and they'll go fight again, and no doubt they will give Linfield a very tough couple of games between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, you're not going to write off Dungannon right now, not Rodney McAree, no chance at all. Like, he'll be at Stanmore Park in the next few weeks, scalping teams, no doubt about it. A few upsets, you'd be maybe a bit more concerned if it was, say that they were playing like a Glenavon or dare I say Portadown, like away from home and got hammered 3-0 or something like that. But there'll be plenty of teams that go to Linfield and take an absolute scalping this season at both ends of the table. Not, it doesn't matter who you are, you're always at risk of that.
We slip back to Saturday, and there's only one game to start off when it comes to this slate. The thriller of the weekend, there's no doubt. 4-3 at Seaview, the first time that Stephen Baxter has returned to the Shore Road, but in the other opposite manager's dugout. And he did them one. It didn't look great early on. 3-0 down. I think was there a goal in the first kind of couple of minutes there. It really looked as though Carrick's season was going to start poor, and were they ever going to get out of it? Like, a goal in the second minute, horrendous. But they turned it all around. Couple of decisions that has irked, let's just say, a couple of fans in North Belfast, but let's give Carrick Rangers something here. That is a fight back and a half. 3-0 down after pretty much the half an hour mark. A lot of people think they are going to be struggling near the bottom of the table. One game will not change a whole lot of people's minds there, but what a turnaround.
Well, it was bad looking at it on the live score apps that they were 3-0 down. But then when you see the highlights, they could have been about 6 or 7 down. Because they were getting absolutely pummeled by Crusaders. And I really did think that, if you were at that game and you were a Crusaders fan, you would have been licking your lips, because that was as emphatic as it gets in terms of attacking impetus at that time. But then for them,
I would be getting that tweet up to that man Peter Cinema, be like, ninth.
Yeah, I think that they would have been getting a wee bit carried away, maybe. No, but I think that's, you have to give credit to Carrick for. I know there's 2 penalties in there, but you still got to score them, and that's still some serious pressure. And I just think that they absolutely fantastic for them to be getting off the mark away from home. And to be honest with you, I'm not too sure this game tells us anything really, because we got to see the best and worst of both teams in one game. And I just think that maybe it was one of those freak early season games where it's not going to tell us an awful lot, and Carrick will not be getting carried away. They understand the assignment, and Crusaders will not be getting carried away because they also understand that it is very early in the season. Although I think that they now have a wee bit of a wait to get that one out of their system.
It's potentially a crushing early blow. It takes a bit of the air out of the balloon for the Crews, because they must have been feeling very bullish after half an hour. All new names coming in, plenty new names in that team sheet, which I'll go through, but all new signings, scoring, collaborating together, and they must felt as though, the doubters, you are wrong. We have got something together here. And yeah, look, they can see that penalty after maybe 5-6 minutes after their own goal. Yeah, 3-1 down, disappointing. But they concede then again before half time, just creates it a wee bit sweaty. But going in, Carrick get that fairly early goal in that second half. It's 3-3 for a majority. Neither of those teams can score, and we can get to the decisions with the second penalty. I kind of think both are penalties. Like I understand the first one is potentially 50-50. I think it's the young fella Elliot Dunlop who kind of clatters into the Carrick player, at least as he clears it. His trailing leg hits the Carrick player, but you're in the box. I think that's a foul.
Yeah, I think that one certainly, as you say, it could be 50-50, but I think it is a foul. In the modern game, you have to sort of throw in that line, don't you? In the modern game,
You do.
and he by the way, he's so quick. I've never seen him before. I was watching those highlights and he was absolutely rapid. The cameraman was struggling to keep up with him.
Yeah, there is actually. The question was going into this season are these Carrick players any good? And the answer looks to be yes, actually. The ones that stood out to me is Elliot Dunlop, who looks to be number 11, and Fraser Bryden, who's number 19. Those two just seem to be buzzing around everywhere. And actually, if you look at this Crusaders lineup, this is maybe a bit of a football manager type dream, because this is the age of the squad bit by bit. You have the goalkeeper who's 25, looks to maybe Tuffy's days as a starter, could be over there, but he is 38. So you have, I think it's Digaba. He's 25, but you go throughout it, you have 22, 19, 21, 36, you never guess who that is, Robbie Ware. Then 21, 23, 19, you've got Forsyth at 34, you've got Lloyd Anderson at 27, and then Lewis Barr 22. That's a youthful team.
Yeah, who'd
maybe that's exactly what a youthful team is going to do: burst out, be up and down, and then capitulate.
Yeah, it's a youthful team, and who'd have thought of the Crusaders? Because in the last few years they've relied heavily on experience. Of course, all their experience has gone to Carrick, but they I think that the one thing is that Cadell not find himself under any sort of pressure there. I just don't see it. I think he'll be given time to bed this team in and see how they develop, and maybe add a couple in. And they're not expecting a league title, or they would love a cup run. I don't think that there's any massive pressure on him at all, and that'll do them the world of good, because maybe they can play with a wee bit of freedom, but maybe not too much freedom where they concede 4 goals after being 3 up.
You say that it doesn't tell us a huge amount about either team. It maybe does say, which I think all of us somewhat predicted pre-season, is that these teams aren't particularly stout, let's just say, at the back.
No, well, I watched the highlights of every game over the weekend, and there was just plenty of really poor defending, maybe a bit of rustiness in the old legs after the break, and some goalkeepers that didn't really cover themselves in glory as well.
No.
But
Crusaders looked naive, like Joe Crow looked like he had a wonder game, because he was picking up that ball at the edge of the box, and the Cruise players looked like a rabbit in the headlights going, oh, what are you going to do now? And they didn't want to deal with that. Like, that'll be the first thing Cadell be going is, a bit more gusto, please, when you have players like that round the box. I appreciate him going for it, or going after, maybe led to the handball and the penalty, but for Carrick, and it's one thing that'll probably only get worse as the season goes along, Crusaders raced into a lead because of the word I used there, raced, because they had all these nippy teenagers and 21-year-olds who just left them for dead, sped past them.
that was the theme throughout. I was watching the highlights again. Every single, it was like every overload was just extremely quick, very very fast. As I was saying about Elliot Dunlop, was so rapid. I know from watching Finney Thorndike at the Glens, he is a quick player. He can, especially when he doesn't have the ball. When Finney doesn't have the ball, he will keep up with play, and he's a good option to sort of run in there. It's when he has the ball at his feet, he sort of will maybe try and skin 1 or 2 people too many. But they've got youth on their side. They're going to be playing a different way. I don't think that they're going to be too worried at all. And again, I stick by my point that I don't think that this game will tell us an awful lot about how the two teams' seasons are going to go. But I think you're right that maybe we can take a wee bit away about maybe how the two teams are going to play.
Yeah, like even that goal, was it the first Danny Gibson goal? I mean, it's a mistake at the back. Like they lose the ball, then Hitley's able to capitalise on it. So the wily veterans went out there for Carrick, but will that be the state of their season where they're conceding more than they really need to? Like they've still conceded three, albeit away from home. A lot actually to be positive when it comes to the Crews. The concern for me was that maybe they weren't going to have the players that could get the goals, but actually there's enough speed there, and they've already proven they can get goals that perhaps they're going to catch out plenty of teams. It's just that, can they shut it up at the back? I think they'll probably get better at that. But lots to be excited for when it comes to both Elliot Dunlop, Fraser Bryden, and a player which I'm hyping up, Adam Brooks. I think he looks to be the like mini offered kind of replacement. Man who likes to run through it all. Maybe he just doesn't have the raw ability that Offord has, but I mean, he set up one, he scored one. That's why he's in my fantasy teams. Let's go to a game that you and I were both at, except from different stands. You were in the packed out away stand at Shamrock Park with your Glentoran faithful. I was there with Ross from around the grounds and all the rest in the home stand of the Ports. Wasn't a great game, but no. Glentoran went out thanks to, I thought, a very good performance from Jordan Stewart. What year is it, Matthew Brown?
Yeah, I said on my own Twitter after the game, I was like, Jordan Stewart was my man of the match. What a throwback. He thought he was absolutely brilliant, to be honest. I thought that the Glens had a few good players and a few players who were certainly trying to find their feet. It was a game in the first half that I was like, wow, here we go again, because Glentoran notoriously start the season, first game of the season is an absolute slog. It's either a late winner or we get beat narrowly, or there was a game one year we actually won 3-2 against Dungannon, and that was exciting enough. But yeah, the weekend was much more of the same of that. The game of very few opportunities, but that being said, the Glens had several players missing, and I'd be surprised if this team lined up again. We had a bit of a change of shape because then we lost David Fisher before 20 minutes, and I actually think that the change of shape went from the 3-5-2 into the 4-3-3, and I think it benefited us. When we were playing the 3-5-2, Ryan Cooney at right back, he was playing balls up the line to the winger, but he was the winger because he was playing right wing back, and that wasn't really going anywhere. And then it was then meant that Portadown were able to get the ball forward to James Teelan, who I thought had a really good first half and was causing Glentoran a few problems, but his finishing was a wee bit wayward, and that really he dragged the shot wide of the Glens goal, and that was maybe one of the only chances that Portadown had in them opening exchanges. And then obviously a bit of brilliance from Danny Amos.
I wouldn't be massively positive about that Glentoran team that I saw on Saturday, but it's hard to really judge too much about it because, as you said to me before we went on here, it's very unlikely that 11 is going to start a single more game together because due to suspensions and injuries and, you know, going away to Portadown, who looked to be pretty much full strength, and get out of Dodge when he didn't play particularly well with 3 points. I did feel as though that's what Glentoran are going to do a bit more this season than they would have previously.
Well, I think that we've often set up to be hard to beat, which is fair enough because we didn't have this array of attacking talent to go out and try and blow teams away. And that was much the same on Saturday because we had a lot of players missing, and there's players who aren't quite there yet with fitness. Like Liam Burt's only been training for a couple of weeks now. I don't think he's had 90 minutes under his belt in pre-season, but he went into the game on Saturday and was thrust into it after 20 minutes because David Fisher had to go off injured, and he wanted to change in shape, so he brought him on, and I thought he did very well. I think that you might see the Glens be a wee bit less conservative this season and maybe go for it a wee bit more. But you'd Josh Kelly in midfield, and he was never going to last the full 90 minutes because we had injuries and suspensions and things, and it was just when I seen the team, I was like, well, how's this happened? First game of the season, how are we here? We're really testing the squad depth early on. But it was just good to get it over the line. I think the second half, the Glens were much better. And I think that we could have maybe nicked another couple, few dodgy referee decisions. Wasn't much in the disallowed goal for Portadown, in my opinion. I mean, didn't know that at the time because you can't really see anything from that end of the pitch when you're in the away
Yeah, it may
stand.
as well happened in Timbuktu.
Yeah.
Regards to you.
But there was definitely one thing I did see, and it was the penalty against Jordan Jenkins. The Jordan Stewart one's sort of 50-50, seen him given, seen him not. But the one on JJ where he eventually went off injured for me was nailed on.
I agree on both sides. The fans at Shamrock Park were furious with the disallowed goal. I was able to use Ross from around the grounds as my instant replay, and I could see that it was incredibly soft. This actually came off the back of a couple of minutes previously. Rightfully, actually, a goal was disallowed for Glentoran due to a little deflection, which took it away from McCarry. But the player that hit off was offside. But you're absolutely right. McKinnon took out Jenkins at the edge of the byline there, and that should have been a penalty. So, in my eyes, honours even there. And from a Portadown perspective, I'm sure they're looking at this game thinking this was a Glentoran team that should have been there for the taking. They had all their best players on show, pretty much, bar maybe Shane McCartan and bar maybe a bright first half an hour where they were getting it down on the ground. They never really capitalise on all that possession and all that time that they were able to try and build up from the back. Like, I can't remember many shots on targets for Portadown, even though they constantly seem to pick up the ball in wide areas. And Teelan looked bright when he got up on the ground, just didn't have either that final ball or couldn't finish it off. Ukek looks to be this presence there. So there's no doubt for me. I think Glentoran should see that as 2 points earned and Portadown as one dropped. A draw maybe would have been a fair result, but I think this year might be a year where there's going to be plenty of those games where fans will always say this, but they'll feel as though that they shouldn't have got the points, or we were lucky, let's say, to get those points. And I think the likes of Cooper, Jordan Stewart, who I thought set it up really nicely, was a real troublemaker across that Portadown back line. Then find Amos. What a nice hit there from him on the volley. I think we're going to see more of those difference makers decide games. And it's those thin moments, but you got to be switched on for 90 minutes if you can.
Yeah, I thought Portadown were definitely getting a lot of joy. Well, when I say they're getting a lot of joy, they looked a lot more dangerous when they were playing the ball on the deck and charging at a Glentoran defence, which had a couple of players in there who they would have maybe looked at their birth certificates and thought, well, we can get at them because they're a wee bit old and we can maybe daze them a bit. But one of those, Kieran Call, was absolutely excellent, and they weren't getting much change out of him. And maybe that is why they changed it up a bit and decided to maybe go a bit longer. Didn't really benefit them at all, and it let the Glens sort of get a grip in the game. But I mean, the Glens are probably a bit lucky that it was Portadown and maybe not one of the traditional top six teams or one of the top six teams up around the top of the table, because they could have been punished on Saturday. But it wasn't, and it was just a professional job getting it done, and it was, I thought that the goal was lovely. It was the ball up the JJ and a lovely cross for Danny Amos.
Liam Burt came on quite early, surprised he didn't start, but overall looks like a pretty nice addition to midfield.
Yeah, he's not fully fit. He had surgery. He had to have surgery before he joined, and he only started playing pre-season towards the end of pre-season. And as I say, he hadn't played 90 minutes. He'd been taken off. The way they sort of edged him in with 60 minutes, and he was in and around that sort of mark. So he certainly got a lot more minutes than was expected on Saturday. I only got to see one preseason game, and it was against Chester, and he was super, I thought. And all the reports from around the Oval is that he looks an extremely talented player. I think that he'll be a big player for the Glens. He's won the league with Shamrock Rovers. He's won the league with Shelbourne for. Don't want to sound like Declan Devine. He's been chirping on about that as well, which is a manager's prerogative. He wanted to sign winners, and that is definitely what he's doing here by bringing in the likes of Liam Burton and Patrick Hubin, as we're told that he's called.
Hubin, as we're going to go. Hubin, as we're going to go. Okay, dead on. I always feel like I'm dancing between the two. I'm sure disappointed from McGlenn's point of view that he didn't get a first bit of action there on Saturday. I think he could have done serious damage there.
I was disappointed when I seen that he wasn't in the team because he looks the part. He's just a classy player, and he's a classy individual as well. The way he handles himself, and it's no surprise that everyone in the media wants a slice of him because he does have that star quality, and he plays massive games, and he's played at a really good level, both in England, and then obviously he's played Europa League football and Conference League football in the for League of Ireland team. So he's someone I'm really excited about. I know that like Ross wasn't big on him last week on the podcast or the live podcast. He wasn't big on him, but I think that the Glentoran have lacked a proven goal scorer for a long time. We've had players who have scored goals, and obviously Jay Donnelly came in and was brilliant for 2 years, but he wasn't a proven goal scorer when he came to Glentoran. He just had those couple of good years where he scored a lot of goals, whereas Pat Hubin scored goals everywhere, and only 8 months ago he was top goal scorer in the League of Ireland, and people are forgetting that. And for him, I don't think that if people look at Joe Gormley last year, no one was mentioning his age when he was banging them in. And giving service and giving crosses, which is what the Glens are obviously aiming to do with the fullbacks. They've got two fullbacks there who can really cross. I think that he could do some damage, and I'd be absolutely delighted if he did so.
Seems like he's got a point to prove as well. Looks hungry.
Yeah, he does, and everyone is trying to. He gave that explosive interview about Derry City and Tiernan Lynch, and everyone's trying to tease that out of him again. And he said in his interview a few days ago, I said what I said. So he
You
does
want
have a
that.
point.
You want a player that's got something to prove, especially at the part of his career that he's at now. You want him to be like, this guy's coming here, yes, to be paid appropriately by his club, but also to try and do things here. Because that hasn't always been the case for Glentoran.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The Glens have signed players before who have came with big reputations. And one of the most disappointing signings we've had and since the takeover was Sean Murray, for example, another player who went and played at a very high level. He played, I think he had over 100 games for Watford, and he went and played again in the Europa League with Dundalk, and then he came to the Glens and he was disappointing. Whereas Pat Hubin, I just get this thing with him where he wants to win. And I've seen him about the Oval, and I've seen him give interviews, and I've spoken to him, and I think that he is just got a bit of an aura about him. And I think that's it's maybe a bit silly to say, but I think that he just gives off that winning mentality, and without having seen much of him in a Glentoran shirt yet, I think that we really needed someone like that in this year. And I'm really excited to see what he can do. And it was funny because earlier in the year, when I heard that he might be leaving Derry City, I thought he was absolutely nailed on to go to Korean, and I was like, he is going to do some serious damage in that Korean team. It was like, him and Joel Cooper, and I didn't think we had a hope. I didn't think that he would, relocate to Belfast. If he has, I don't know. I'm assuming. And I'm just absolutely delighted to get him, and I'm delighted to see what he can do.
Just reflecting on Liam Burt, I like the physicality that he brings. Like, he's a pretty big boy coming into an area of the pitch which I feel as though he needed to add a bit of extra quality. Looking at that bench, I know it will be thinned out as the season goes along, but there's a nice mix of quality and youth along there. It's a interesting season for, I think, James Douglas, because he's a player that I thought he could really kick on and do something for the Glens, and I wonder, is he sort of just going to be slightly off the boiler or never be given that chance in the same way as he maybe flirted with last season? But I look at the likes of Whiteman and Russell. Are those players that maybe could be lining up on loan for somebody else? Because I'm sure they're players at a time in their career where, like, they want to be pushing on, they want to be playing first team football, but they perhaps have the hardest shirts in that Glens team to rip off in Amos and Cooney.
Yeah, well, I think certainly Aaron Whiteman, you'll not see him go out on loan because the Glens just don't have any right backs in the team apart from him and Cooney, Aaron started off as a right winger, and then he was like converted into this right back, and he did really well under Rodney McAree at right back. He then we went away in Europe, to Malta, and he had a really poor game, as a young player against Jazeera out in Malta, and after that, he hasn't really had this consistent run at right back where he's been brilliant. So I do question if he is a right back and if he'd be better suited as a right winger, which we haven't seen an awful lot of him play. He's only got a year left in his deal, and I'd be surprised if he was to go out on loan because I think that it would maybe signal the end for him. Uh, Johnny Russell, on the other hand, he he's went on loan to Dundela, came back, won the Glens Player of the Year, played plenty of games last season. The joy about Danny Amos is he can play further forward, and I know Declan said in his post-match interview that it's unfamiliar territory for him, but he spends a lot of his time in that sort of area of the pitch, and the amount of assists he got last season, and he scored a handful of goals as well. He's got a wand of a left foot, and I think that he's more than capable. Johnny Russell will get plenty of games, and I think that he's a very good Irish League player who can learn a lot off Danny Amos, who you need to remember too, Danny came from a higher level and is still young and will no doubt want to get back to that. He's another player who is in the last year of his contract. Glent don't have that many this year in the last year of their contract. It's not like last year where they were sort of like, worried about who would stay, who would go. It's not like that this year. Everyone's sort of like under 2 3 year deals, but he is one who you could see someone from England coming in, and Johnny Russell just naturally slides in there.
And you're hoping Cooney's going to be just Amos part two on the other side.
Yeah, well, he ticks all those boxes. He's got 250 games in the Football League, which is a remarkable, when you look at that sort of record, the fans of his previous clubs have nothing but good things to say about him. He gets up and down that line, which is really good because you don't just want a right back to be sort of stuck in his own half in this modern game, and I think that he will have a big impact in there. He's only in the team, and there was something that stood out yet that was on Saturday was he wasn't afraid to sort of speak up and have a go at players if they did something that he thought was poor, and I like that. And I said earlier on in the first half he was playing these balls that would be really nice if for example we're playing the 4-3-3 and Dylan Connolly was playing right wing and him using his pace charging at the defenders. It would be a really nice ball, but he was playing this right wing back where there was no one ahead of him, so the ball was then there was no one there in that space. When we switched to the 4-3-3, he got a lot better and he really grew into the game. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do, because if you've got the two fullbacks who are up with the play and they're dangerous, it can make a massive difference to how you play, especially in a team like Glentoran that don't have a lot of width. I think we've got two wingers and they're both suspended till about October time.
Let's talk about a situation that a lot of people were fascinated by during the summer, and that was the Glentoran goalkeeping situation, because you lose one of the better players in the league. Many people would describe him, I think it's a no-brainer, that he was the best player in his position within the Irish League. In Yolai, Mills, that contract he was given in January seemed kind of obvious now looking back on what was going on there. He is the man with the number one on the back of his shirt, and he is the man that currently is in possession of the starting place. Are you expecting that to be a battle all season? Because Mills, look, he has all the traits to be your number one.
Yeah, I think Andrew Mills will have to, it's his shirt to lose. He has earned the right to be Glentoran number one. When Yulai left, I said that we're very lucky that we have Andrew Mills as a number one now, or we had him as a backup, because I think he's a very good keeper. Now, granted, that was on a very small sample of games. He played all our County Championship Shield games. He played against Portadown and did well on the 30th of December, just before the turn of the year. And he is an absolutely fantastic guy. He is a really, really popular member of the squad, and he's a great goalkeeper. From what I have seen of him, and from what I've heard as well, like I heard that he pulls off these what they call TV saves in training, and we've seen it in the County Championship Shield. He was absolutely super against Lord in the County Championship Shield final. And then I think there was a game in pre-season against Dundela where he had a mistake. He made a mistake, and people were like, "Oh, what's going on, you know. And then I think the other keeper came on, the trial keeper that game, and basically he made a mistake too. So it can happen, but I would be confident that Millsy will keep the number 1 jersey until cup games, and then we'll bring in the new guy, your Imsky. I don't know. The Glens don't sign keepers that have easy names to pronounce. We'll figure that out around November time, probably.
Well, Mills didn't have a huge amount to do at Shamrock Park there on Saturday. I mean, Portadown and how they're going to do seemed to be the thing that stood out from the podcast last week with Ross's prediction of 12th. He even went to Shamrock Park there on Saturday with the aim of talking to Portadown fans and see if they could convince him any differently. I was surprised because I out there and helped them that a lot of Portadown fans went, "Oh, we're not going to finish 12th," but I mean, you're not totally wrong. Like, if that's Portadown at full flow with their best team for now, and I'm sure they want to get a bit more oil in the wheels and all the rest, but there's a lot of teams that are in the same position, but you worry about them right at the top of the pitch.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I said at the live pod. I said that, you know, Portadown, you could just sum it up with Mid Ulster should be worried about their striking options this year, I think. But there's a lot of teams I think you could say that about. But Portadown do lack that forward, and you don't really see them going and trying to, you know, test anyone's resolve, or I don't know. Obviously, you can't just go out and sign whoever you want. There needs to be the money there, and you need to live within your means. But there are strikers that are sitting on benches, not getting games, or maybe like could do with a loan. You know, Lauren have an impetus of forwards. And I know the Glentoran fans will say that they don't have a lot of forwards, but there's forwards there, and there might be, you know, if someone would come and ask, then maybe you might get one. I would be concerned for them if they're not going to sign another striker between now and the end of the season, or the end of the season and the end of the window. I just didn't see where the goal was going to come from. Now, obviously, they have one ruled out, which so it's maybe a bit silly of me to say, but their finishing when they did have a chance was maybe a bit panicked. I thought they just maybe pulled the trigger a bit soon when they had time. And maybe they weren't talking to each other. They didn't know what was around them, and they weren't looking in the peripheral vision. I just think that they were snatching the chances, and you can't really do that, especially in a home game against a makeshift team.
And maybe it's just the standard of the Irish League is starting to get better up and down the division. But I thought Alton Top was quite strong at the back. Maybe not the best game for McKinnon. Ben Wiley seemed to flash at times with winning the ball and then kind of spreading it out to these wide players who could be tricky. But from there, it just felt as though they got stuck in the mud when it came to being high up the pitch. And actually, sometimes teams need to be quite wary of standing off and letting those balls come into the 6-yard box into the danger area. I think Glentoran could have stood back all day because there was just nothing coming from there. And even if they get in there, there wasn't a huge amount of bodies in the right area to knock it home. So let's not get too caught up in it. But they are a team that desperately need a striker, probably a striker with a bit of experience just to tie it up, because later on it seemed to be Jordan Gibson was the player they turned to from Loughgall, who isn't really a striker either. So yeah, the bright sparks there from Portadown, but it's concerns that maybe what we saw on Saturday could be a reoccurring theme. We end with Glenavon against Ballymena, and the first step towards my prediction that Ballymena are going to be pretty good this year started off thanks to the boot of Donal Rocks, a player who perhaps not a lot of Irish League fans have a very strong opinion on him. He's a midfielder, but often times last year got moved out to like being a wing back or, you know, a right back or something like that. Or he's a player that's probably more well known for getting red cards, for being totally honest. But he showed all the work and determination to get to that back post, get that early goal in the first half, let's just say, for Ballymena, and then absolute rocket in the second. And it's 2-0, and Ballymena finish off 6-for-6 wins when it came no draws on the opening game of the season.
Hey, that second goal was so strange to me. I think that the keeper should be doing better
He shouldn't
there.
be hitting it from there. I'll say that as
No,
well.
no, yeah, he had no right to hit it from there. For a start, I don't understand. When I looked at the score and seen that Donal Rocks had a double as well, I was quite surprised. I thought that was surprising. But then when I watched the highlights and I seen the goal, I thought that maybe the second goal the keeper could have done a bit better. Ballymena had plenty of chances. They could have won this game by much more. Maybe there was something that they didn't show us on the highlights, but it looked a very one-sided affair for me, to be honest. It looked like a bit of an onslaught from. There was a couple of goals or a couple of chances, sorry, that the fans had thought had gone in, and they all got very excited to be cheeky back heel at one stage. But no, it looked like a very one-sided affair to me.
And if you talk to Glenavon fans, they are panicking. This is not a good start to the season for them, and they're starting to really worry. I looked at the starting lineups before any of the games kicked off, and I thought, hold on, no O'Connor, no McDade, and the new striker that they brought in, neither of them there. It was McGovern that was pretty much leading the line by himself. Now they changed that at half time and brought on Lombardo, but oh, look, they will bounce back. They'll have better games than that. But I'm sure if you're a Glenavon fan, you're thinking, you know what, Ballymena, come to town, first game of the season. You want to at least test them. And by all accounts, they didn't do much of that.
No, and it's just where I think that I think a Glenavon fans must find themselves in a bit of Groundhog Day these last few years. It's just the same stuff every window or every season where they'll maybe go on runs where they'll do well, and then they'll go on runs where they'll not do so well. I mean, you could apply the same to Glentoran, but maybe a bit more dramatically at Glenavon, and that they lose a lot more.
What do you think? You should mix it up and get relegated just for the crack?
Something a bit different, yeah, maybe so.
Mix it up, Limavady away. You never know.
But they are a team who have, I said it again. I mean, keep on tripping back to the live pod, but I mean, if this doesn't tell you anything, you should get a ticket for the next one, guys, because it's absolutely golden. Peter Campbell. Peter Campbell is going to be a big player for them if he can really switch it on. I thought he just rediscovered a bit of form towards the end of last season, and that is maybe where they're going to have to look for their goals, because I don't see where else they're going to necessarily get them from. Is Davy McDade going to score a lot of goals at the ripe age of 34? He hasn't really been overly prolific in recent years. Michael O'Connor did well for them last year, it has to be said, but again, he's not really a prolific goal scorer. When he was at Glentoran, I liked Michael O'Connor. I thought that he did a good job, but his game wasn't like, he was never going to be a 20 goal a season striker. And I just think that they're maybe lacking that, or maybe a midfielder who'll get them a few as well.
They just don't have the same amount of burst that perhaps other teams around them may have, and you kind of start to worry because we started this podcast hyping up the fact that Bangor and what I'm describing as somewhat chaos ball in their way of just they're going to absolutely hassle those back lines and try and make them beat the amount of bodies that they have at the back. But you can see Glenavon, and I saw it plenty of times last season, huffing and puffing and passing around the box and going close and hitting the bar. And then all of a sudden the team who's had maybe 20% possession in the first 60 minutes go up the other end of the pitch, knock it in, and Glenavon are having to try and claw it back when they'd already been throwing pretty much everything at the other side already. There is skill, there's an ability. I've always liked Jack Malone in centre midfield. Can they get something out of Malin? He played the full 90 minutes there on Saturday. But they are a team without that same dynamism that perhaps other teams have. And I think maybe that game, yeah, it's one mega hit from Rocks, and it's a nice tap in at the far post from him to get the 2 goals that made the difference. But it's still the difference that was made. And you look at that Ballymena team, and from Ben Kennedy to even the likes of Corbally, who I think is going to have a bit of a big season for Ballymena. There's just players in and about there that can maybe snag a goal, and they've got more potentially coming off the bench. Darragh Connor had to kind of have a bit of a cameo there for them. So, I mean, it's a big season for Ballymena, is it not? I said that last week. It's a good win, but they need to start continuing on here and not falter in games against the likes of Carrick. You maybe even say Bangor and stuff like that. They need to beat teams like Glenavon away and try and sneak points off other teams. And the way we've seen Cliftonville started, the Crew started, even add maybe Dungannon, Lauren perhaps, Ballymena should feel confident that week to week they can cause trouble.
Yeah, and I think that it's a bit look. Ballymena are maybe a team that I haven't given a lot of credit to. They do have a good squad there. I just think that maybe looking down through previous years that they will maybe threaten to do well and then not do so well. But they do have players now like Darragh O'Connor who are direct and will cause teams issues, and they've caused my own team plenty of issues down the years, even when we've been considered to be much better. So it'll be really interesting season to see, and they'll be looking to break into that top six. You know that is what they'll be aiming
Has
to.
to be the aim.
That has to be the aim. Whereas on the flip side, the home team, Glenavon, what does their season ahead look like? They'll just want to stay out of those sort of bottom of the table relegation places. They'll not want to be flirting with that at all. They'll not take away. They'll be very disappointed by Saturday. I've absolutely no doubt about it. They do have the likes of Campbell to come into that team. They do have Lombardo to really try and put his stamp on it. So there's plenty of football to be played. No one will be pressing any panic buttons, and you also got to realize that they have a manager there who is very highly rated. He did a great job at Cliftonville, and it'll be interesting to see if they're getting what they're going to get out of that team moving forward, because he did certainly get a bounce out of them last year, and now he's had his own transfer window to sort of toy about with things.
Big turnover at both clubs over the past few years. There's no doubt for both those managers that this is very much their side. Like, especially at that Glenavon team, you compare the amount of players who are left over, even from the Hamilton era, which doesn't feel that long ago, and realistically it isn't. It's 2 and a bit seasons ago. So pretty much most of those players have been cleared out. So it's now McLaughlin with his 3 training sessions a week. It's him and Sim boys trying to achieve what's been set out for them. What that is, I don't exactly know. I think it's just trying to progress some of the younger players like McGovern and just not be caught up with all the drama at the bottom of the pitch. But look, it's one game, and it's not like Glenavon have a good record for the opening game of the season. Anyway, Red Hand posted this. From 18-19, they've lost to Linfield at home, drew against Glentoran at home, beat at Portadown at home, drew against Portadown away, that 2-2 against Ballymena, which I talked about last week. It was the Prendergast late goal where, Glen were down to 9 men. At least they got a draw there. Losing to Glentoran, that Darragh O'Connor goals we were talking about, even though it was Jed Donnelly who scored it earlier on, and then losing to Carrick. So regardless, all of those seasons ended up with them still being a top flight team, so they'll not get too worried about it. So let's not get too ahead of ourselves, but let's look at the table if we might. It's not like where we have Blackpool at the top of the league as we might have in previous seasons. In the top flight, it's not like Bolton or in Champions League places. That's what I always remember about looking at the table of old. But as we said earlier on, we have a situation where we have 6 wins and 6 losses. So pretty much, unless you won, you're 3 points off the title race already. But Swift's bottom because they lost by 3. Then you have Glenavon, Cliftonville, Ports, Larne, and then Crusaders are the best of the losers because they scored 3 goals. Then we have Glens, Coleraine, Carrick Rangers, Ballymena, Bangor in second. That's what they want early on doors. They're up in second, 2 goal difference, scored 3, but there's Linfield top of the table. I think the big things from this weekend are that Linfield and Coleraine won, particularly for Coleraine, that they're still evens with Linfield. That'd be frustrating for them if they're already looking up. Oh, we're 2 points behind. We're 3 points behind. Elsewhere, I just think it will be a one weekend and we'll forget about it. It's nice to have all the games being played this weekend because last year was frustrating that we had some of the games called off for a variety of reasons.
Gerard Lawler rejoices because there was sort of the NIFL proposal that allowed this to happen this year, and I'm sure that he'd be absolutely delighted it went through because there's nothing worse than how like that was absolutely ludicrous last season. It really was, and obviously it ended up to Lawrence's detriment, in my opinion.
It did.
And I think that it's just sensible. What they're doing this season is sensible, and I like to see it now. It might not have a massive impact because a team might not get through into the groups. Linfield have a good chance, and obviously they're not winning that so far, but I expect them to progress. But it is good that we're not playing catch up so early on. It just looks a bit silly. It's a bit like sometimes I look at the amateur league tables and I'm like, oh look, there's a team that's sitting fourth, 12 games in hand, and it's like, it's absolutely crazy.
Oh, I know. And there's like 2 weeks of the season left. Yeah, no, absolutely. You didn't want that. It was a little mark on the season and kind of drew away a bit of the excitement. Where I was like, if Lauren could win 4 games out of their last 6, you never know. No, so we have a full round of games there. Like we say that we're going in the next week, and they are probably delayed for a good reason. But a strange weekend because we had 3 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday. I think that was fun. I went to the game obviously on Saturday, then I decided to watch the game on the Sunday. Someone said this to me, and I do think I quite like this idea of like the ideal schedule might be Friday night TV game, 4 games on a Saturday, then a wee Sunday to potentially watch as well. Like, does that feel grown up, or do you just like that as well?
No, I like that. I like that idea. I love being able to watch a Friday night Irish League game. It's great. They brought it in during. Well, I mean, it wasn't the thing that it didn't exist before COVID, but during COVID, it became a common thing. And I remember saying at the time, after all this is over, I really hope they keep this because I love nothing more than getting a few beers and sitting in the house and sticking on the TV and watching an Irish League game. Or now that we're allowed to go to games, it's good if you're able to travel to one. Bangor played a lot of games on Friday nights last year, and they're not far from me at all. And they would really pull on that because there'd be quite a lot of Glenmen in that sort of area. So if they have a game on a Friday night, and the Glens have really taken their foot off the pedal with Friday night games, we used to play a lot. Now we don't play that many. You would get those supporters sort of going, and it definitely makes more of an occasion, even if you do have neutrals in the ground, because they all get very excited, and it is good. Sunday games, I'm all for them. I wouldn't like to see Glentoran playing regularly on a Sunday because it's just not a sort of day of the week that I would like to be taken away, maybe from the family, or we're competing with the Premier League games, which is obviously huge. We
Yeah.
had the Community Shield yesterday, which maybe isn't as big a pool as what, like, say, a Super Sunday, because the Premier League keep their best games for a Sunday. But you've got other, I suppose you've got other things to compete with at all times. There's always something on to compete with. So you just gotta roll.
Which is what you're saying is that perhaps if there was less Premier League
Yeah, exactly.
opposition when the Irish League's playing their games, that might be a positive.
Yeah, absolutely. They should, you know what? They should just stop playing Premier League games on a Sunday and start playing Irish League games on a Sunday. Give us the Sky money.
Yeah, well, what I would say here is I wonder when and if we're going to see our first Sunday evening game. Is that where it could slot in?
Yeah, in my opinion,
Because Lawler's talked about this whole thing of, I forget which country talks about how league in Europe brought in this Sunday evening game and all the fans hated it. Now it's like the main event of the weekend and everybody loves it. Like, could you see Cliftonville against Glentoran 7:30, let's say, on a Sunday evening? I don't know, but you could see how that could be tried out this season.
I think that it has to be if you're playing a Sunday game. The Glens played Cliftonville on a Sunday a few years ago, and I'm pretty sure it was 12 o'clock kickoff, and there was a bumper crowd for it, a really, really big crowd, and the atmosphere was great. It was actually just a good spectacle, for want of a better word. I don't really like referring to football games as spectacles and making it sound like some sort of big event, and these are just fans that go every week that want to watch their team, but I don't think you can go up against the Super Sunday game. I think that you do need to either try the early or you need to go for the later kickoff and try it on a Sunday night. Why not? Maybe a better one would be, what about a Sunday night before a bank holiday? That last Sunday in August. Perfect. Like that's a nice. Usually it's usually really good weather around then. So it'd be a nice night. You could try a bit of a later kickoff. I am open to trying new things, and I know there's loads of people who are dead set against it, dead set against any change in this league. But I'm not one of those people. You just gotta try it. If it doesn't work, you say, "Oh well," but try it and you move on.
Sunday night or Monday night for you, if you had a choice?
Sunday night for me. I think Monday night football. It's 2 days usually after everyone else has played. It's just not. I've been at work all day, and it's just not really for me. It was a big novelty whenever I first came in, and they were showing the games on Sky. I remember when I was over at uni, it was a godsend. They got because they always pick Glentoran, Linfield, or Newry. Seemingly, it was on all the time. But it was a godsend then, and I remember they used to get massive crowds because everyone thought they might see themselves on Sky. Like, how ridiculous does it sound now?
You know, it's funny you mention that. I oftentimes think how much of a novelty it was to see Irish League games on the TV, and how incredible it was that they were, oh my goodness, they're going to Solitude, and we're going to see what Solitude looks like on the TV proper. And now, I mean, we've seen every single ground up and down the country. We're kind of sick of the sight of it almost now. You know, I don't think we appreciate how much of a novelty it was. I also don't think we appreciate how much of a factor it may be in the renewed popularity in the league, that it's drawn new fans in a way that perhaps wouldn't have happened if it was a case that it was only the short snippets every Saturday night. That was the only way they were seeing Dungannon, or let even say Coleraine.
I definitely agree. Don't get me wrong. From what I'm led to believe, the Irish League clubs get a bit of a raw deal out of the BBC deal, or out of the TV deal. Sorry, like Irish League fans or Irish League clubs aren't well reimbursed for.
Well, that's their opinion. I'm sure
Yeah,
it's a bidding process. I'm sure whoever gets it, be it the BBC or anybody else, it's a fair deal.
but this is the thing. It's like there's not that much competition for it, so they feel like maybe sometimes they're inconvenienced. For example, moving their games to a Monday night for Sky when they think, what's the benefit of that? But the argument is that much like Ulster Rugby, when it was on BBC, their attendances went through the roof because people have seen it and seen that it was a Friday night event and they absolutely loved it and it was a spectacle. And again, and people just went to this thing, went to this big event. And I do think that it's sort of, it's raised the profile of the game a wee bit in this country. Someone approached me the other day from Scotland, and he said, how hard is it to get tickets for Glentoran games? And I was like, well, not hard at all. It's like, he's like, I wouldn't mind going to the next big two game. I said, well, I'll let you know as soon as tickets are on sale. And he goes, because I've seen a few games on the TV, and it looks good, and I would like to take it a game. And I don't know. It's hard to really judge, but I do think that what teams lose out on, maybe in their opinion, financially, they might gain in other places. And yeah, I think it's going to be a good thing.
We'll quickly touch upon the European games before we get into this weekend's games, as these European games are having an impact on the scheduled games. Linfield, stinking result out in the Faroes. They simply have to make things right back home on Thursday.
Yeah, and I think they will. I just think they will. I didn't see the game and out in the Faroes, but I had heard about how it went, and I was really surprised, to be honest. I thought when Linfield got the equaliser, I thought that they would go on and win that comfortably enough. It was interesting. I read Linfield fans say that Dungannon were better on Sunday than that Faroese team were last week. And I just do not see a scenario where Linfield don't win that comfortably. I think they're going to get a really early goal. Just came off the back of a really good win against Dungannon. Offered is found his shooting boots, and he'll be starting in that game. And yeah, I just think it's going to be a very, very comfortable night for Linfield.
Well, they definitely need to turn things around there, both for themselves. Like, there's no real guarantee, and I don't think the odds would be stacked in their favour to get through in Europe, but they have to get through this part, not only for their own bank balance, for just the whole purpose of spending all the money on these players, but also just, it's a game where they need to win and should win, and I think it will just put a real poor start to the season if they can't finish it off, and they should. It's Fairways opposition, make it happen. You have a bad game away from home, you need to make sure that doesn't happen at home. They've got the players, they've got the quality, make it happen. Now, if they do eventually get through that, uniquely enough, they could be seeing their old pals Shelburne, but they might not now, because Shelburne pulled off maybe one of the best results in European history for a team from the Republic of Ireland, going out to Croatia and winning. They are taking this side back to Dublin, and they have a chance to get through straight to the Europa League group stage, because if they win this game, they then will have a playoff against somebody else for the Europa League, and if they lose that, they go into the Conference League. If they win that, they're in the Europa League. Happy days. That might not happen, but that's who awaits Linfield. It's weird to hope. Like, I do think Shelburne, even though did win away from home, I do think Shelburne is a team, if Linfield get through, they would want to play.
Yeah, I mean, they will. They were very disappointed with the draw, but they will definitely want to play Shelbourne if Linfield get through and they get a team from Croatia, they will be hard done by, because that's a horrendous draw for them. They're no strangers. They played Dynamo Zagreb.
In the winner's
Yeah,
path as well, like they could have had Lincoln Red Imps, you could have a Maltese, you could have had, Luxembourg or Estonian, but no, it's either Shelburne or a Croatian side,
Rijeka. Yeah, Rijeka.
Rijeka.
Yeah, and I think that
Rijeka.
they played.
So
They've been no strangers. They played Dynamo Zagreb many years ago. And they know how tough this opposition is, and I know they're full time and stuff. But this is just different kettle of fish. And that's some result for Shelbourne away. But they will be hoping for
crazy.
Shelbourne. But again, that's no easy task for them. But Shelbourne actually, since they beat Linfield, have sort of gone up a wee bit of a level, and in terms of their performances, what I've been reading, I haven't seen them, but I read that apparently they've just looked a bit more convincing since that result against Linfield.
Here, look, I didn't particularly feel great about how they played up at Tulka, but you know what? Second game, they took it to them. They were unlucky in that, and I think that would be a really good matchup for both sides if Shelburne and Linfield were to meet again. But there's plenty of football to go before then. Not much hope for Lauren going into that first leg, 3-0 down at quote unquote home up at Ballymena. I mean, this is what we're forgetting about these European ties. You can sometimes go against teams who are good, who are a lot better. And was it Santa Clara up in Portugal? Well, far off Portugal, to be fair, off that island. Yeah, they're a far better team than Lauren, and they will very much see that out over in Portugal.
Yeah, I think Lauren fans were just delighted that that stayed 3-0, to be honest. I think they feared the worst. Hard to see them. It was hard to see them getting anything at the start, and they can hold their heads up high, because it's no. I think that they know their European venture ended in the last round.
But 3 rounds for Lauren, they've done themselves, you know, a world of good, not only for their when it comes to like their rankings, because obviously they're like kind of a seeded team almost now, but helps the Northern Ireland coefficient, helps their pot, particularly if there's finances not being as readily available in Lauren, that helps kind of build themselves up to keep where they are. So fair play to them. But because of those games, that means that there isn't a full schedule of games this weekend, because of those games being moved. So we have only 4 games, all being played on Saturday. What we're seeing postponed, because I think they were both penciled in for Friday night. Ballymena against Linfield and Larne against the Crew. So you're right. Crews are going to have to wait until that Tuesday game to bounce back. So the 4 games we do have, and I would probably say this is probably the biggest of the weekend. Cliftonville host Coleraine. Can Cliftonville bounce back, or are Coleraine going to make it 6 points out of 6 and really show this league what they're all about? Because I think going up the Solitude, that's the type of game where I'll be to and fro, bit of huff and puff. If Coleraine are 2-0 up at half time, I think we'll all really see what this beast is all about.
Yeah, I think that the Korean probably going to win this, and I don't know, with it being at Solitude, I think it might be a pretty tight, low scoring affair. Solitude's one of those grounds where Cliftonville can be as poor as they want anywhere else, but when it comes to Solitude, they always seem to bring the shooting boots, and they always seem to turn it on. But I just can't see. And this is probably going to be a story of the season, to be honest with you, unless Korean really, really flatter deceive later on. I just can't see Korean losing this early on in the season with the quality they have. I know that Cliftonville's record is actually very good against Korean, but that it'll mean absolutely nothing here. I couldn't even tell you the last time a Korean beat Cliftonville. Off the top of my head, I would have to look it up because I'm pretty sure every time the Cliftonville play Korean, it finishes with a Cliftonville victory, but I don't think that'll be the case here.
Well, if Cliftonville struggled with the press of that Bangor front line, I don't think it's going to be any better when you have Cooper, Shevlin, Patching, Glacken, and all the rest barreling down on you, either with you in possession or they having the ball. I'm going to go 2-1 Coleraine because I think maybe Cliftonville can get something from a set piece, but I think Coleraine will get ahead and they'll see the game out.
I'm gonna go for another 1-0. Because I think that Cliftonville will try and see that this is Cliftonville's game is they are always better when they do take it to the opposition. I always find that when they play us, certainly when they take it to us, they're much better, and I think they might do the same and maybe try and get at the Korean, and I think they'll maybe get unstuck there, and Korean will run out one of the winners.
Another potential banana skin for a traditional top six side as Bangor come to town and Glentoran have to face off against them. We were saying earlier on that Glentoran didn't really feel like they were in the full flow, and here comes boisterous Bangor looking to hurt that back line of yours. This could be a real fascinating game. I do actually think Glentoran are going to win out 2-1, but if Bangor take an early lead, oh no.
We have to improve our home form. The Glens need to make the Oval, it's cliche to say, they need to make the Oval a fortress, but the Glens need to rely on their home form. It just wasn't good enough.
Scoring goals at home is the biggest problem for you if you get winning.
Yeah, scoring goals is a massive issue, or was a massive issue, and hopefully the interesting thing is when we lost Fiatzule, and instead of replacing them with a like holding midfielder, we've just gone and signed attacking midfielders like Jordan Stewart and Liam Bird. So hopefully that is a sign that we're going to go for it rather than be a bit more conservative. And I do think that the big pitch at the Oval, first game of the season there. The likes of it's a good opportunity for Pat Hooban to come into the team and get his first goal, get off the mark early. I just think that the Glens will maybe have too much for Bangor. Bangor will be very encouraged by their performance against Cliftonville, but they also had a bit of a stroke of luck at times against Cliftonville, and I just don't think that they'll have that on Saturday. Hopefully.
I think the Oval will be the main factor. How do you think it's going to end? I'm going to go 2-1 Glentoran. I think Bangor will get something from a set piece.
I'm going to go 2-0, and I do think that Pat Hooban will get off the mark for the Glens if he starts.
Swifts and Portadown face off at Stanmore Park. Neither of them getting a win last week. You kind of favour the Swifts here, don't you?
Yeah, I think this is a good chance for the Swifts to get points on the board. It won't be easy for them. Portadown will go to Stanmore Park, and don't get me wrong. Like me and you can sit here and talk about how the Glens had multiple players missing on Saturday, and it was a good opportunity for Portadown. Niall Curry isn't looking at it like that, and the Portadown players certainly aren't looking at it like that. They're going to have a wee bit of confidence about them that they were expected to go out and get beat by this Glens team comfortably, and they could easily have got a draw from that game. So I think that they're going to go with a wee bit of confidence, and maybe Dungannon tails will be down a wee bit because of the result on Sunday. And I do think it'll be a tight affair, but I do think that Dungannon will win 1-0.
I reckon this is 0-0.
I think that'll be fair as well. To be honest, I think that could easily be the case. Dungannon, another one of those teams where you're maybe thinking they've lost their main man up front. Where's all the goals going to come from? But we've seen it before with Dungannon. They've got plenty of goals in that team throughout.
Yeah, I think it's a cagey first 70 minutes and then gung-ho, one will maybe batten down the hatches and go, we'll take this for the last 20. And finally, Carrick against Glenavon. If there's any game I might go to, it might be this one actually down at Taylor's Avenue. It's one of those ones where, like, particularly at that part of the table, like, it's a 6-pointer already. Like, literally, it's a 6-pointer.
Yeah, well, I suppose it is, but I mean, this is what I meant by before the game on Saturday tells us nothing about Carrick, because I literally you could say that this is a great opportunity for Glenavon to go and get 3 points on the board had it stayed 3-0 the Crusaders on Saturday. But because they made that miraculous comeback, you're now looking going, wow, what are you going to expect here? You're certainly not going to have a 4-3 here because I'm not convinced Glenavon have 3 goals in them. Um, but I
No.
but I think that it's going to be an interesting one to watch, and I think it might end in a draw. I think it might finish one each here.
I can see where you're coming from. Where does this come from? I'm actually gonna back Carrick to sneak a goal, and Glenavon is not able to do it. I think that Taylor's Avenue is going to be an advantage for them, and I just worry for Glenavon that once that goal goes in, they're just gonna panic even further. Um, and that is such a weird position for Glenavon. If that was to go through, and obviously if it does happen, we'll talk about it a lot next week. But 6 points off Carrick, 2 games played. It already feels uncomfortable if that was to happen. Of course, could go the other way and it's 3 points each, and who cares? But I think if Glenavon can win here, it's a big result, and I would be treating it as big a game as they will have this side of Christmas.
Well, I would tend to agree because you see if you pull up Glenavon's fixture list, I think that they have the toughest run at the start of this season, because they played the Glens, Coleraine, Cliftonville, Dungannon, Larne, Linfield, the Cruise again, or the Cruise, and then Portadown in the Derby. Like that's their run for the like right up until October time, and you're going. I mean, we say this every year, right? Don't we? We say, oh, you could be sitting there in October with no points. Like we say that about a team every year. But you're looking at those fixtures and you're going, that's a very difficult run. Anything can happen in a derby game. You're looking at those other games against what is traditionally the top six, or at Cliftonville, who finished seventh last year, would be in there. So this is a massive game for Glenavon to have to get points because I don't think Paddy McLaughlin wouldn't find himself under pressure. I don't think in that scenario, but you just would worry for Glenavon if they didn't get anything from this game, and I don't know if that'll maybe play into how the game goes.
You wonder if they have, like, they bring in, is it Jacob Carney, who played for Portadown for a brief bit, but like ex-Man United, was like reserve keeper at you know Newport County there. So is there a few more like that? Like, they have not been scared to go out and get the men that they like. You're talking the likes of Murphy in there. So could there be a few players like that change it for them? Perhaps. But look, in many ways, you say it's a long season, but there's still only 38 games. And the problem with a team like Glenavon or Portadown or Carrick or Bangor is that they can't play themselves. So there's one less team around them for them to play against. Glentoran can go against all four of them, and there's one less Glentoran for Glentoran to play against. So, yeah, early doors, lots of big games. They'll come thick and fast as the week goes ahead. There are, of course, games on Tuesday evening next week. Let's just see how it plays out with this podcast. But there is a chance that you'll get a podcast on Tuesday and you'll just have to like it. Rather than delaying all the review of the Saturday ones. But Matthew, we've seen a queer bit of each other, from running about the Oval to, well, then running about different parts of Shamrock Park, and a little evening together drinking a pints of, well, at least you only had one pint of the black stuff or so down at Puck Uglies. I think many people very much enjoyed the set. Not that the first show was bad, but they very much enjoyed the second show, and you got to pat yourself in the back for being a part of it. It was a great night. A really busy night at Puck Uglies, must be said.
Oh yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. I would really encourage anyone that would consider having a ticket for the next one, if there should be a next one. And anyone who hasn't seen our amateur dramatics promoting it, I highly recommend you go back and watch that too. This was the talk of my work. People who have absolutely no interest in football. I work in the comms world, so there's all sort of indie video and things like that, and they were like, "What is this? Why do you just appear?"
A mate of mine who knows nothing about Irish League football was like, I didn't know who that guy was, but he seemed important, and you were, and you are. Tell us about Shout at the Oval. How's it looking for this season?
Yeah, well, definitely going to be back again this season. Bit more consistency, hopefully. Get a pod out here, probably not this week, but maybe the following week. Going to be interviewing. There's plenty of new faces at the Oval. Be getting them on board. Maybe a few more legends as well. And hopefully aiming for another live podcast of some description. Let's see what other team we can reunite this year. There's plenty of them down the years. Maybe branch out to someone a wee bit older. But yeah, it's just that we used to release the podcast fortnightly, and then life sort of got in the way, and that didn't become too.
Procreation happened.
Yeah, that happened. Became a father and started a new job, and just a lot started happening. But I'm going to aim for at least one a month this year, and get the players on, because they're big hits with the fans, and everyone always enjoys them. And people who say they live away. I get messages from people that live in America, or Australia, or Canada, and they're Glenavon, and they love listening to it. So that's always encouraging. So we'll see what happens.
Well, Matthew, you're always a welcome and very insightful voice, not just on the podcast, but obviously on the live stage there last Friday night or so. Maybe we will do that again. Let's just see. But until next time we meet, either in person or on the podcast, have a good one.
Cheers, Peter. All the best.
Thank you very much for joining me this week, back for another slice of Irish League chat and natterings. If you're new here and you don't follow me on social media, now's a great time to do it. You've got Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and now properly TikTok. I'm a wee TikTok boy this week, putting out videos, getting lots of people angry and smiley and laughy and all that type of stuff. It's Kicking Match across all of them. If you don't know, you can also email the program if you so desire. It's kickingmatch@gmail.com. Until next time, and hopefully that'll be Tuesday, but things could change. Check for social media because I'll see what happens, but very likely it may be Tuesday afternoon/evening by the time you get my latest podcast from me. Expect them to be coming to you every Tuesday evening/afternoon. Yeah, until then, goodbye, and I'll chat to you soon.